I want to try a little thing that we've done in some of our work, which is called Minty. Has anyone used Minty? Okay, maybe some people have. I'm dropping it in the chat, but you can go to www.minty.com and use the code that I've entered in the chat, 21655878, and we're going to try to make a word cloud about peace. What do we think about peace right now in our minds? What words just come up? Not whole sentences, just words, or maybe a couple of words. And I'm going to pull it up on my screen as well so that you can see it. What I was hoping we could do is just think together about words that come to our mind when we think about peace. So if you want to drop some words in the chat, or if you want to just, okay, so we got love. What else do we have?
Lost the chat.
If you can't drop it in the chat, if you want to just unmute quickly and say it, just try not to talk over each other. Justice, quiet, calm, compassion, equality,
dignity,
dignity,
Health,
health, one world, justice,
Powerful,
powerful, solidarity, tranquility,
one another,
one another,
respecting one another,
respecting one another, commitment, diligence, God, transformation. Those are all great words, lovely words, and it would be a beautiful word cloud if I could have gotten the Minty to work. We'll try that again one day. It'll be a little experiment. Food for all, caring, and all of these I think are part of that cloud, that universe, that terrain of peacemaking. So I want us to keep that in mind as we're talking together today. So I'm going to try to continue to have this interactive level as we go through. So we were just talking about the event coming up about with Gascon, and about the whole thing with blowback on progressive DAs and things. So I wanted to ask you, because I know that you are people who stay on top of all the news. Do you think that we're going to vote this time just with thumbs up, thumbs down, or thumbs to the side? Do you think that violent crime is actually increasing? Yes? Not sure? No. Okay. Well, actually, interestingly enough, violent crime is on the increase in our country. I don't think it has to do with our DAs, but I think there is some, and Joe would probably be good at helping us analyze this, that some level of my imagining is there's a lot of frustration, pent up frustration and anger about COVID. And I was just reading an article in the Atlantic, if you haven't had a chance to read it, about what do you do now that we can take a breath. And it's talking about the grieving process. So like people are saying, oh, crime statistics are highly manipulated, probably. I mean, I think you're right. But it was talking about, I notice it even in smaller ways, like when we're out and about, it seems that people are angry a lot. And I'm thinking that's a lot of channeling of this grief reaction. And that's what the Atlantic was talking about, that there's all this grief pent up in us, and it comes out, in ways unexpectedly. when the event is over, because when the event is happening, when it's not the pandemic is over, but we're kind of getting ahead of the curve a little, we're just trying to get through. We're trying to survive, and we'll deal with that later. We'll deal with that later. We'll deal with that later. And then we get a break and it's like, oh my gosh, you know, what is all of this? And I don't think we teach ourselves very well what to do with that. What do we do with all those feelings? What do we do with all that grief? How do we even begin to process that? So that's kind of where I want to start this morning, to just say that I think this is part of a landscape of things that are part of systemic violence. So there's violence in our community, but there's systemic violence, which is way more ubiquitous and harmful, because it's every day, all the time. And that's often the economic violence, violence of poverty, the violence of economic struggle, and the experience of going through that, I think, is a lot like that. Is a lot like that grief kind of reaction. That what do you do with that? You know, how do you're just surviving, you're just getting through it. I read a quote this morning I was going to share with you, and it was let me see if I can find that. I'll drop it in the chat because I thought it was so helpful. I think it was in relation to COVID, but I thought it was so helpful overall. Okay. And basically, this person was saying, I dream of never being called resilient again in my life. I'm exhausted by strength. I want support. I want softness. I want ease. I want to be back amongst kin, not patted on the back for how well I take a hit or how many. And I think about that, you know, with their kids and with the people we're working with in economic struggle. And it's true, you know, it's like, oh, they're resilient and we can develop resilience and but at a certain point, we want to move beyond that. We want to fly. We want to thrive. We want to excel. We want to do all the things that are beyond survival, beyond resilience, which I think resilience is about survival a lot of times. So with that kind of as our starting point, I thought, you know, I will start us off with a little bit of again a voting scenario, but the first few are, I don't know what you call that, I forget, in like baseball when you lob little soft balls across the base to make it easy just to get started. So we'll start with a few of those little easy lobs, and then we'll get into a little more oh, I think I didn't share that. There's the quote. So here's the first one. And again, we'll just keep with the thumbs up, thumbs down, or thumbs sideways. You can do it digitally or with your actual thumb. So the first one is, one of the solutions to our to trying to have less violence and more peace is tougher penalties for crime. Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs sideways. This is your lob. This is the softball. Yes, of course. It does not. We know that. We know it from research. We know it from experience. That does not help us get to peace, and it does not address even violence. Okay, how about this one? This is another kind of soft lob, but Soraya, you'll appreciate this one. This is what people often say. We need stricter parenting. If we just had stricter parenting, we would really get the kids in shape. Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs sideways. Thumbs down. Yes, see, I knew y'all are going to excel at this test. This is a very crafted for those of us who have been in this work for a while, an easy test. Okay, here's another one that gets tossed around sometimes. What we need are less school electives like art and music and PE and recess, and we need more focus on the basics like math, reading, writing. Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs sideways. Thumbs down, indeed. Because when we take those things away, we're taking away kids' childhood, first of all, and we're taking away the fact that they're embodied, secondly, and we're taking away the fact that our minds, even as if they were adults, what they're not, can't develop in that way. We need to develop all of these things that become part of our way of seeing the world and thinking about the world. And oh, I see we're getting some comments. Unity of shared skills and more nonviolent parenting. Yes, for sure. Nonviolent parenting would be a big boon. Although we still have a little ways to go to convince people that that is indeed a better solution, even with the outcome research. Okay, now here we go into a little deeper. How about this one? Better economic policies to support families. Would that make things better? Yes? No? Yeah. Yes, indeed. Indeed, indeed. And that's part of what I was saying, you know. Yes, families can be resilient, but should they have to be so resilient all the time? Shouldn't life be a little, you know, like I told you, some people one time, you know, I went to a event out in like Palos Verdes in Rolling Hills, and I went to like a Bristol farm store there for the first time, and it was like, oh my gosh, you know, everything's so pretty, and you know, it just seems like such a nice fluffy kind of experience. And there's a dad there with his kid, and the kid's like, oh dad, let's get this, and they're just shopping like this is every day. Well, this is not my everyday, nor most of the people I know's every day, you know, that you go shop at Bristol Farms. And so then I was at a Ralph's store, and I saw a mom with her kids, and the kids, I just was struck, you know, it struck me. These kids already look like their life is about a lot of struggle. You know, they you can see it in people's bodies and their faces, even as children. And it's like, why should that be? You know, why should there be such discrepancy and disparity? And why should we then have to depend so much on, you know, like that Blanche Dubois, the kindness of strangers, you know, some great philanthropist to throw some money towards something? Why can't people have enough so that they can make those choices for themselves? I think they would prefer that. I know they would prefer that. So there's that. Okay. And then that becomes part of the cycle too. Like people are like, well, we can't afford to pay people more because, you know, it'll make our profits so much harder. But if we pay people more, guess what? Then they have more money to pay. So then we can charge more for the goods, more what the goods actually cost or the services, so that then they can continue to be paid more. It becomes a spiral upwards instead of a spiral to the bottom. Okay, so here is another one. We're still kind of lobbing them over easily, but that's because they're just moving in a positive direction now. What about more safe spaces to belong and be supported? Yes? Yes, indeed. Indeed. We must have these safe spaces because do you know, when I first came here, I was kind of startled. In one of my classes, we were reading this article, and it was talking about how to get people out of gangs. Well, I was from small town in Tennessee, and we didn't really have a lot of gang experience, although now they have some of that going on, but back then we didn't. And so I you know, you see these movies and you hear all these discussions that seem like, oh, this is such a complicated landscape. How does this ever work? But you know, there were just really two factors that they said were the things that can help kids get out of gangs or young people. And you know what those were? Anybody want to guess?
Music.
Music is a good one, but that wasn't the two primary ones.
Sports.
Music.
No,
Art.
no. Think about Homeboys. What is Homeboys' motto?
Oh, education. Job training.
A job. So there was an economic part, you know, give them a job, give them an opportunity. And the other part, which I think Homeboys excels at as well, is a sense of belonging, a significant relationship. Just those two things, you know, and I think that's part of what we miss, that sense of belonging. And I'll have to say, even in my work with the kids over the years, I think for a lot of years, I underestimated, undervalued that. But if you think about kids that are growing up in a world of struggle, in which everything is hard, in which everything is, you know, like prickly and difficult and challenging, to be in a place where you belong, where you are loved, where you are treasured, is not to be underestimated or undervalued. And again, I think my colleague Joe here would be able to affirm that. Yes. And so one of the things that we've come to say over the years in our work with the kids, we have a mantra that came from a friend of mine, and we say it to the kids all the time. And we tell them that they are beloved children of God and the universe. They are uniquely gifted. And there is nothing anyone, including them, could ever say or do that will take away from that. And I think that is such an important message to kids, you know, that they have value, and especially in a disposable society in which we act as though some kids are disposable, as if some kids' lives don't matter, you know, whether it be because of color or race or economics or whatever. No, that you matter, and you matter deeply. You have something unique to offer to our world, to our landscape, I think is a really potent message. And I think sometimes it matters even in spaces like this. Like, I love coming to ICJP. This is part of my community here. But even here, sometimes I hear echoes of that. I hear people saying, well, I haven't done these kinds of things that some people have done. I'm not, you know, a leader of this or a person of that. But you know what? We need to grab hold of that message for us too. We are all beloved children of God in the universe. We are all uniquely gifted. We all have something to contribute. And for every person who's out there that's the face of something, there are hundreds of people who are the actual body, the actual embodiment, the actual hands and feet and work of something. So yes, you know, sometimes we need that charismatic person or that catalyst kind of person. But what is that person without a movement, without the community, without all the people doing the work? They're just like John the Baptist in the Christian tradition. They're just a voice in the wilderness, and a little wacky at that, right? So we are the people who make things happen. We are of value, and we are just as valuable as that face. That face is just a way to help move the cause forward. But we are the cause. We are the people. And we should never forget that. And just like the kids, you know, we got to remind ourselves of that, and we got to grab hold of that. And then this is a really important one as well, you know, kind of that thing we were talking about with Homeboys. So giving the kids that belonging, but also giving them opportunities to grow in leadership and economic opportunities. We don't have like tons of money to offer, but if I can leave you with a thought, if you are going to offer an internship in any program you're a part of, anything, any work you're doing, and you're going to try to recruit kids coming out of communities of economic struggle, please offer some scholarship, offer some stipend, Because you can say, and I've had it said to me, okay, so we don't need to fund these internships. They're getting experience. That's the benefit. That's the value. But you're talking about kids coming out of economic struggle, and they will put together what they need to make that happen if they have to. Their families will sacrifice. They will sacrifice. But should they have to? Shouldn't we be fairly helping them for what their contribution is, and not just saying, well, we're giving them experience and that's the contribution? I think we should. I think we owe that to them, especially if we want to recruit them in larger numbers into our work. We've got to support them. Oh, we got some comments in the chat again. Safe parking too for unhoused in vans and cars. Yes. And should people be having to live in vans and cars and then we tow them off and throw them back out on the street, or tell them they have to go to a hotel? I heard a thing on the radio yesterday about people going to hotels, and they were saying they had to be in by 7 p.m. and they couldn't even get in by 7 p.m. and still keep their jobs. So, these room key, hotel things. So it's like, we've got to do better. And they don't need a temporary hotel room. They need a home. They need a house. They need Australia to have home. They need a house. They need a structure that they can stay in. Okay. And the value of libraries being a public space. Yes. And libraries, we used to have a local library in our community, but they condensed a bunch of libraries into these big hub libraries, which are nice, but they're not our library anymore, and kids can't walk to it safely, and they have to go down a number of blocks and cross a railroad track and all of that. So yeah, you're right. We need those public spaces like libraries. And the pandemic, I think, has impacted people's sense of community and belonging. I think it's helped us grow further apart, if anything, in the divisions in our country. Okay, so here is a final one on your vote. And this is the lobbyist's softest lob of all, which is more education in peacemaking and experience in peacemaking. Yes, no, yes, 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 emphatically. 2 thumbs up. Yes, for sure. This is a thing, right? That we, even if we do all the other things right, if we don't give kids the tools and the experience to use them, then they could be really good human beings, but they may not be part of our landscape of really moving our equation forward on peacemaking and peace leadership. And we've been doing that for a lot of years, as I said. And one of the things we've used, and some of you have heard me talk about this, and that is this little acronym we use called laughter. So let me share screen here again with you. And this is just a way to help the kids think about and remember the components that we say of peaceful communication. And starting with listening first, which is very anti I think our US culture. We start talking first. Start with listening first, and then asking questions to try to understand what the other person is saying. And then we start talking, but we talk from a place of our feelings, not just our beliefs. I believe this is wrong, or I think this is this. No, well, when I hear you say that, I don't know exactly how I feel, or I feel a little worried, or I feel a little hopeful. Whatever it is we're feeling, those are a strong place to come from. And they're places, feelings we can talk about without having to step all over each other's toes, right? We can talk about those and have an entryway into a dialogue, a conversation. And then, when we reach points of conflict, which we will do no matter how well we practice peaceful communication, we try to find a solution that works for both people. And I got to tell you, even, with our grandkids over the years, this is a challenge, right? Because we want to win. We want to prevail. We want our point to be right. We want it to be acknowledged. And this really requires us to honor both views and come up with something that works for both sides. And that's a challenge. And I think about that a lot on Facebook when it seems like people are really out to prove their point and that they're right and flame other people more than they're out to really understand or listen or try to honor someone else's viewpoint. And then the errors this is where we get to, I think, a huge component of transformation where we have to forgive each other. We have to ask forgiveness and forgiving each other, even if the person doesn't ask to be forgiven. That's a sticking point for a lot of people, including our kids. Oh, they didn't say they're sorry. I don't have to forgive them. But we don't just forgive for the other person. We forgive for us. We forgive to transform. We forgive to let go. And then we get to the making it right, which is also a challenging thing, I got to tell you, for kids, because like, what's that? I'm sorry. I'm done. It's like, did you try to make right what you broke? Did you try to repair the relationship or the thing that you broke or replace it? So, oh, and Soraya had to jump off, had to go. Nonviolent communication, no fault zones for our kids in our home is critical. Okay. And communication negotiation, teaching the history of peacemaking. Yes, for sure. And we've done that. I have to acknowledge a colleague, John Brennan, when we were starting to study peacemakers in different traditions and around the world, and we had a wall of these peacemakers, and John Brennan was like, they're not people, they're movements. We need to study movements, and we need to have movements on the wall. And he was exactly right. And so we started to kind of build from there. And then Grace would be happy on the wall. We used to have Costa Rica was one of the places that made it on the only place really that was on the wall besides the people. Let's see. And then I wanted to also say that in this work we've been doing, one of the things that I'm really proud about our program that I do think is not always a part of every program is that we have worked really hard to take all comers. And sometimes there are peacemaking programs that are looking for peacemakers. Oh, you're a peacemaker, come and join us and we'll do great things together. And that's a great thing, no doubt about it. But what if we recognize every child is a peacemaker? Every child can be a peace leader. And we work with every child. And just like we said, that mantra of, they're uniquely gifted. Every child is not going to be the same kind of peace leader, but every child can be a peace leader and bring their unique gifts to it. We had, for instance, we had a young person, and she was so quiet most of the time, but she was so artistic. And her, she was one of our ICUJP interns who came with us and her name was Miriam. But, she brought her own gifts to that. She brought her art and created things for us about peacemaking. So, part of it, I think, is not one size fits all. It's finding who each unique person is and what their unique contribution is. And supporting and encouraging them to move beyond their comfort zones and grow in their leadership capacity is not always easy. Sometimes it's hard. And I have people who do that for me and they challenge me, and we don't always like to be challenged, but that's how we grow, right? Like people who just always tell you, yeah, you're great, you're doing great, don't worry, keep doing it. That's nice, it feels nice, but it's not how we grow. Sometimes people have to say, you know what? I think you can do a little better with this. Or have you ever thought about that? That's how we grow. And that's how kids grow too. So I wanted to share with you briefly, it's just, I think it's 2.5 minutes, a peace talk that was given online in Zoom by one of our youth interns. So part of what we do is we have a pathway for the kids, and they start when they're young kids. They come up through the programs until they get to high school, and then they become youth interns. And we do give them scholarship funds to help in two respects. They learn to lead the little kids. They help with that leadership and they develop it. And we mentor them and nurture them, but we also challenge them a little with these peace talks. So they have to pick a topic of interest to them. They have to craft a talk about it, and it's got to be kind of a persuasive talk, why you should care, why you should get involved, why this matters, and connect it up to themselves and to our program a bit. And the one I'm going to show you is from one of our young people named Ashley. And Ashley grew up in our programs. She came when she was a little bubbly kid, and she loved coming, and she came every summer. And one summer her mom didn't get her registered and the camp filled up and there was not space for her, and she was so sad, and it about broke my heart, which is why I'm a bad gatekeeper. I was like, which has come to part of it. But Ashley has continued with us, and now she's a youth intern. She's 16 and she made her peace talk, and I want to share it with you. And everybody's peace talk is unique and different, just like they are. And they make us proud because we see, like, you know, they're thinking deeply about these issues. So I'm just going to share this with you. And I have to say too, Ashley, like many of our kids, and I think all young people, but especially kids who are already in economic struggle and have so many, you know, challenges, have really had a lot of struggle during this COVID. It has really hit them, I think, even harder. So here we go. Ashley.
Home alone and feared for your life? A woman can't
Okay.
wear what she wants without hearing commentary from men. Let a woman be confident in her body, and all of a sudden, men will feel entitled to saying disrespectful things to her. A lot of the time, men will look at the clothing on a woman and see that as an invitation, and that's just not the case. Women should be allowed to wear what makes them feel beautiful without having to face any of these consequences. It is unfair for women to feel beautiful and be expected to deal with harassment from men. I'll be using a friend as an example. She's the same age as me, 16 years old. She is a victim of this type of harassment from men constantly. She cannot go to the store without being on the phone out of worry that a man will decide to catcall her from his car. She has a beautiful style that doesn't consist of any revealing clothes. Even if it did, it's ridiculous that a young girl has to worry about these types of things. It's disgusting, and nobody should have to deal with that. More often than not, men will counter this argument with the statement that they'd like to be catcalled as well. They want that sort of attention from women. Here's the thing with that. When a person says that, they're consenting to getting catcalled, and that's completely fine. If a woman doesn't consent, then that's immediately sexual harassment. Once you consent to that, that is no longer sexual harassment. Consent matters. What if that woman had to deal with the uncomfortable feeling of dealing with sexual harassment constantly? Would you still say she should feel lucky for having that attention? Is she still lucky for receiving that unwanted sexual harassment from men? It matters, because if you were to ask your mother, your sister, your friend, they'd all probably have a few stories to tell about unwanted harassment they have to endure. Many of you will say, well, what can I do about it? You can start by reaching out to people you know and empathize with them. Many people will make victims feel like it's their fault. A lot of them don't ever bring up their stories for fear of being judged and misunderstood for something that they were forced to go through. Reassure your family that you will be there for them, that you will support them and help them in any way you can. Here at Peace Camp, we are all here to support each other and understand. We are never alone in these tough times and during situations like these ones. We are a close family. I know this will not end sexual harassment as a whole, but this is most definitely a step forward in the right direction. It's something everyone can do and will make everyone feel more comfortable with themselves and their issues. We need to remember that we are not alone. We have people who love us, whether it be friends or family. We're not alone.
Okay. So, yes. So that was Ashley. And, you know, I know that this visual and the sound are not the highest quality, but it's the best we could do on Zoom. And you know, it makes me proud to hear the way that that our youth interns take on these issues and the voice they're developing. And I think that's part of how we grow this leadership that we're talking about. And then let's see. Oh, I was hoping that together, well, I wanted to say first, you know, we when we started this work, we set our goal to help develop a cohort of peacemakers and peace leaders. And we've reached that goal. And we're now seeing some of the next generation of those people come back to us. So we're trying to, you know, continue to grow out our work with more outcomes and measures and share our curriculum. We created a Seek the Peace Collaborative to share our curriculum with some other groups who are now using it and trying to do their own kind of peace camp. We're trying to grow our fundraising. Just like ICUJP, we don't have a Department of Peace in our country, Geraldine, yet. And so that means we don't have this source of funding and support for this work like they do in Costa Rica and some other places. But I think together we can create this place for these kind of programs. We can make a difference together. We can get involved, we can donate, we can share our ideas. All of those things can make a difference. And then we can work together, right? There are things we together can do that can be stronger because we do them together, like getting a Department of Peace, like lobbying together with Anthony, you know, trying to get some of our young voices, which means if we do it online, they may have access, but we need to change the timing because they're not available till after school. So that usually means, you know, like a 3:30 meeting. It means that we need to keep building out our peace education together. We need to do more mentoring. And, you know, in the lieu of a Department of Peace or peacemaking, maybe we can together create little regional hubs. You know, we can make our work stronger through that. Let's see. Oh, Ashley's confident and persuasive, feels loved and supported. So impressed. Put the website of Peace Kids in the chat in case people want to go there and donate. Okay. So I will do that. And then that kind of is where I was hoping we would land so that we would have a little time for some discussion, which I think is always, you know, part of the interactive landscape that we want to have together, that because we're colleagues in this, right? We're not like strangers and we're just hearing about this. This is what we do. This is our bread and butter. We all together work to create peace. So let me put this link in the chat. And if you want to look us up sometime, you want to see what we're doing, it's just solacommunitypeacecenter.org. And somebody was asking me what the word Sola stands for. It's a word that actually means peace. It's in Pashto. I think that's how you say it. And it's a word that means peace. And we liked it because it means peace, but also because it also seemed like an homage to South LA embedded in that peace word. So that's how we got to Sola Community Peace Center. Okay, so questions, ideas?
Okay, so please raise your hands. I see Steve and Carol Francis. You can also put it up, and then I see Rose. All right, keep lifting your hands, and Fernando too. Yeah, Steve, go first.
Susan, it is so wonderful for you to have some extended time to share all of this with us. It is a blessing. It's one of the strengths of ICUJP. We're like a hub and the spokes go out into the community, and you are one of our strongest spokes. It's just marvelous to think that day in and day out, you wake up and you do this work, and hundreds, and if not thousands of children and families have benefited from this. I was so uplifted today listening to the way you framed this conversation. And I'm proud of us for supporting you with scholarships and other support along the way. And I hope we've given you moral support along the way. My question comes from the pillar of feelings in your laughter paradigm. I acknowledge that feelings are very important. And they have a place in this. But in our contemporary society, teaching children to elevate their feelings, how do you balance that against QAnon, conspiracy theories, the diminishment of science and facts over feelings, facts over beliefs that dominate other systems of thought? These issues are on my mind very much these days. So how do you balance encouraging kids to look to science, to data, to empirical evidence, and not simply rely on feelings?
Well, first of all, thank you for the kind words. And it is always a pleasure to be part of this community and grounded in this community of peacemakers and peace leaders. And secondly, it is a good question. So this is a paradigm, as you called it, for communication. So what we're teaching the kids are, the fundamentals and the knowledge base of peace and justice. So we're teaching them, for instance, like this summer, we're going to take a deep dive into LA history and how groups of people came to LA. So we're basing it in those realities, in those truths, in those facts. But in this communication kind of paradigm, it is seldom helpful to come into a communication with something like, okay, this is the way it is, right? And without acknowledging the feelings. And again, I ask for some of my colleagues here to weigh in on this as well. This was a hard learning for me when I was a very young occupational therapist working in a mental health setting. And people had some really interesting kinds of ideas and beliefs and whatever, and denial, of what was going on. And I was, we'd have these team meetings, and I was saying, but, this is just denial. This is not helpful. We need to, a person who was dying was like, no, I'm not dying. I'm not talking about dying. I don't want to deal with that. And I was like, no, we need to deal with this. And the psychiatrist would say, these defenses are there for a reason. And they're there because we can't deal with something. And the way we're going to move beyond that is not by storming the gates. It's when people feel safe and they feel like they have a safe space to talk about those things. And I think about that a lot too, Steve, with the people in our country and the deep divisions. There are people I adamantly disagree with, but I recognize that their ideas and their beliefs and their values are coming from a deep place. And if I don't understand those, we're never going to connect. We're never going to have the deep conversations that could lead to transformation. And so I think that's part of what we're trying to get.
Just a quick follow-up, Grace. I appreciate so much the way you responded. And I don't know if I put it out last night, I will today. The New York Times has dealt with how do you deal with those who are hesitant to get vaccinated. And they literally tracked what you just said so briefly, that you don't beat them over the head with facts, with information. Initially, you listen, you hear their anxieties. Why are they hesitant? And this interactive process at the New York Times that I'll circulate does that for COVID hesitation, but the process is exactly what you're talking about. At the end, you do get down to information, but you don't beat people over the head with it initially. Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess that's a good lesson also about people who want to go to war, right? And how we, want to give them the facts, and we got to first stop and listen. Okay, good. Very good discussion has started here. Carol Francis, you're next.
All right. Thank you, Susan. As a retired teacher, my question is going to be about interacting with the public school system. I really love the fact that you brought up the importance of art and music. And there was a time when, because of scores of children I taught once on reading and writing and math were low, what they did is they cut out everything else. And at the beginning of the year, they gave us a mandated schedule. We teach reading until this time, and until lunch or till recess, we do math, and then our writing and math afterwards, and English is the second language, and that's it. Not only cutting out the arts and PE and music, but cutting out social studies and science and health and everything. And this one coordinator from the district that taught teachers how to do this new program that was just, you better learn these reading skills or else, or writing skills or else, and you better bring those test scores up. She said, well, if kids can't read and write, why are you bothering with things like social studies? And I thought, so they can read a map? And then I thought, no, because our Black and brown kids need to know their history and how unity has always been necessary. They've got to understand it. So, I would get in trouble because I'm teaching something that I had a class. I asked them what other kids thought of them, and they all said, the first hand that shot up was, we're the worst class in the school. That's what these fifth graders told me. So I gave them something where they learned how to counteract that by quoting from each other's. And I got in trouble for it because I wasn't teaching this, what you were supposed to be mandated to teach. So my question, Susan, is, do you find your students growing up through these various times, do they ever relate what's happening in the public schools, and do they ever take back what they learned in peace schools to their regular classrooms? Is there any sort of interaction that improves? Do you ever get to talk to their teachers? Or do the teachers ever have any say in what they're allowed to teach anyway these days?
Very good questions. Thank you, Carol Francis. And it's an interesting thing because our kids come from a wide swath of the community. The schools are numerous that they're involved with, and the teachers, and we don't really have contact with them, the teachers from that, but we do now have this school curriculum that we're doing with USC's JEP program, their service learning program. And that program is specifically in school classrooms. And that is USC students who are trained up to lead these this curriculum we developed. And they go into the school classrooms at the teacher's request, and they lead like a 6-7 sessions of our curriculum in the classroom, which I think is valuable and important, like you said, to start to connect up the dots. It's still, though, you know, it's not an immersive school experience like that. A peacemaking school was part of our dream. I still hope one day there will be that maybe we can pull off, but that's at least some connecting up. What we hear back from the kids about school often is, you know, not like, okay, they're learning this in school already, they don't need it, not that kind of thing, but often it's, you know, like, yeah, you know, at school, you know, this happened, you know, I got picked on, or somebody, you know, else got picked on, or, you know, what do we, you know, this is what's happening. It's usually more like, this isn't what we do at school. So I think it is a bit of a challenge to be translated, and I do hope it can be in more schools more widely, so that it is the whole immersive experience and not just, this is a little section.
Good, thank you, Susan. Rose, you're next.
Okay, first of all, thank you, Susan. That was really, really impressive. What I'm going to say will probably be very controversial, but I've taught in England and I've taught in Los Angeles, or London and Los Angeles. I'll compare exactly. And in England, there is only one subject that is absolutely compulsory, has to be taught for at least half an hour a week in every single public school, and it is religious education, which is absolutely a no-no here. Now, having gone through the English system and had it from the beginning, now admittedly this was a long time ago, before England was quite so multicultural, we started off with the basics of Christianity, which are the basics of a lot of culture. If you read Shakespeare, read any classics, all the references. So it was kind of a cultural background. But as you get older, and certainly when I was teaching in London, that half hour a week was used in such a valuable way. In secondary school, the kids were back in their homeroom. They were given a lot of information about all the different religions, especially the ones represented in the school. And one school I was in had many, many. It had 42 different languages, would you believe? And a lot of different religions. So they were given a little kind of inflow into each, discussions with each other. And then as they got older, again, in what we call high school here, most of it was discussion. I mean, like the wonderful thing that your student just, you know, showed us, your student's 2 minutes. That kind of thing came out of that. And that little bit gives children a chance to develop so many of these skills within the school system. Now here, unfortunately, the country is so divided that I feel there'd be a lot of indoctrination, which really there wasn't, not in the situations I was in anyway. But I just want to throw that out as a different pattern that I've given a lot of thought to since I came over here and discovered that doesn't exist here. And I felt, being in schools here, that there was something missing. And it's not the praying religion, it's the ethics and the peace thing. Anyway, I'll shut up now.
No, I think that's really valuable. And I was listening to someone at a USC sponsored conference about spirituality, and they were talking about how important that spirituality is to kids, you know, however that gets expressed, and then as adults, how it becomes a part of our resilience to have had that kind of spiritual underpinnings. And I think, yeah, maybe sometimes in our country we've thrown out the baby with the bathwater, so that we don't try to enforce a particular religion on kids. We don't really acknowledge the whole spiritual side of ourselves, as if, you know, like that's taboo, like that we can't talk about that. But we are, if we're holistic beings, we have a spiritual side, however you want to, you know, connect to that or label that. So I think that's a good point. I just wanted to mention too that Joe in the chat was talking about the thing he was mentioning earlier, which I was interested in, about attachment theory and being able to express these hostile and jealous feelings, and you know, even towards, you know, parents, and that's part of how kids develop self-control. And I think that's part of our message when we talk about feelings as well, that kids will tell you there are bad feelings, you know, and we shouldn't have them, like anger or jealousy or you know, even sadness. Those are bad feelings. We shouldn't have those. And so part of our messaging is, you know, feelings are all okay. They're just trying to tell us something. And how we express them, we have to make a choice. But that's, I think that's a really important message for kids.
Good. Thank you, Susan. Fernando, you're next, and then we have Geraldine and then Anthony.
Yes, Susan, I really appreciate your presentation. You know, I guess for me is that how do we interconnect many of these issues that's happening while, you know, our government itself is the one who's really violent. You know, being hungry is a violent thing. You know, out of education is also a violent. You know, that you know, without opportunities is a violent. Also, we have to define that as a violent condition. You know, the systemic racism is also a form of violent among, especially among us. You know, the black and the brown. And so, how do we? I guess my question is that how do we interconnect and have these children? Because yeah, definitely, you know, we need to nurture many of these young people. You know, I forgot that you know, the television, the programming of kids on television, the games that being introduced to, you know, to become a warmongering, you know, like the war games and so forth. I guess I just stop from there.
Yeah, no, thank you, Fernando. I think that's a really good point. And I think I think it's important to because this is a question that's come up before to us in our programs. Oh, you're a peace program. So you're just kind of teaching kids to just be peaceful no matter what, everything's good, you know, be calm, everything, you know, like that. But when we talk about peacemaking, we always talk about what our definition of peacemaking is. And you know, the English word we have for peace, I think, comes from the Roman word pax, which is the Pax Romana, which was just an enforced lack of war, right? Like we're gonna squelch this and take dominion. And what we like to deal with is a really much better word that I wish we had an English word for, but it's the Hebrew word, the shalom. Shalom is a holistic word for peace, and it's about peace and wholeness and wellness and peace with justice, all of those. That's our closest word. We have peace with justice hyphenated, and it still doesn't encompass all of that. But in that kind of frame, you can't get to peace and just say, okay, now we're all peaceful on top of injustice, on top of all these problems. You know, part of that peacemaking compels us to interact with those unjust things, with those injustices, and to transform them, to create nonviolent social transformation. And I think that means, you know, yes, you know, our you know, one of the things that can get me frustrated very easily is when people are like, there's no money in the budget for that. We don't have money for these things. You know, we don't have money for Department of Peace. We don't have money for, you know, all these social programs. And they are, first of all, the Department of Peace doesn't even exist. And the social programs are such a minute part of the budget, right? We all know that. The majority of our budget is military and defense spending. And you know, like Anthony dropped a nice comment in the chat about, you know, the fact that in countries like the Scandinavian countries, they always do well because they focus on this kind of well-being, this holistic model that we don't seem to have here. And then,
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Rach, were you
I
gonna?
thought you were finished.
I was just looking at your comment to see if there was something you were saying.
Oh, no. I just wanted to make sure that Anthony remembered that Costa Rica is one of the happiest countries in the world. And part of it is precisely because it has focused on peace and social and educational well-being rather than on war making.
Yeah.
But that was an aside for Anthony.
Well,
if I could just say, Grace, I'd love it if countries in the world all competed on which country is the happiest, most joyful. Like, we wouldn't even be close to, the top 10 or the top 50, but Costa Rica and Norway are up there in the top.
Yeah, and I think that's very related to one of my working hypotheses is people don't believe in government because government doesn't work for people. If we had a government that wrapped around us and cared for us and ensured our well-being, I think people would have way less problems with investing in our government. I think it's because it doesn't feel like that to people. They resent it.
Well, we also have the issue of taxes, right? Those countries in Scandinavia have very, very high taxes, and people are willing, but we think more about our own greed and don't want to pay taxes. Anyway, let me go to Geraldine and have her give her question because we're going to run out of time.
Oh my goodness. Now, with all of this conversation, you've got me all over the place. Costa Rica was one of the first countries to establish a ministry of peace. They don't have an army. But Susan, I couldn't agree more with everything that you have presented here. And thank you for the shout out for a Department of Peace Building. If that were established, your program could be taken and go nationally, with the funding. And yes, there is funding available. It just the budget needs to be reallocated. We need just like 1%, I think, out of the military budget, would pay for that. One of the 5 cornerstones, and it's in our blueprint for peace, is teaching peace in schools. And I do know, and I should connect you with our leadership lead for that. Back in Washington, D.C., there is a Lafayette School that they teach peace there. They actually have a peace class. And on one of our trips, we went on a little excursion, to observe this. We at one time had Students for Peace, but that was university based. And when the 2 wonderful people that led that graduated, so did that program. But in San Diego, we do have a group of Kids for Peace that are active currently. And I just want to commend you on this wonderful program and getting a curriculum together for USC and for teachers to be taught, how to do this is just so important. And you're right, the whole program does what you're doing with expanding it to be a wholeness for the kids that are coming from domestic violence homes and being taught there that violence is the solution to solve their problems. This is really, really critical for them to be able to have an opportunity to learn this different way, to be able to live and be happy. So thank you so much for this. And I love your title, Sola. That's great. Anyway, I'll stop there because I know we're running out of time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Geraldine. And yeah, and I just saw Avon dropped in the chat that how can we get this Department of Peace off the ground? And I think that's a big lift for all of us, but so important, you know. And I do think, I just want to say one quick thing to Geraldine. I know that there are more peace and conflict studies in universities now, but you know, I've been a little bit both heartened and disappointed by that, because it seems like a lot of it focuses on out there in the international realm, which it should, but without the personal component. Like,
right, yeah.
it is really hard to go around the world telling people what they should be doing if we're not practicing it.
Song title comes to mind. Peace worldwide starts inside.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, Anthony, and then I think it's Stephen Fisk, right? On the phone number 7229.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Go for
Great.
it.
Well, I love what you do, Susan. And I've sort of gotten off on this thing thinking about Michael Moore's movie, What Country Should We Invade Next? I remember he goes to Norway, where they do extremely well academically. And he asked the teachers, well, what's the secret of academic performance here? And the teacher says, we try to make our students happy. We encourage them to do the things that make them happy. And it was so simple, and yet it's so alien to the kind of approach we often take in the United States, which is, how do we get our students to work harder and achieve more? But as we know, that doesn't really necessarily lead to happiness. In fact, it might actually lead to the opposite. And I think that applies to the work we do as activists as well. Sometimes we need to remember to just focus on what's fun, what makes us happy, what brings us joy. And you do that so well in your peace camp. I remember being part of a couple of events that you've been doing. And one of the things that brings happiness to me, and I think a lot of young people, is being in nature and gardening. And I remember planting a tree, I think it was a fig tree or something. But that aspect of helping kids to get in touch with nature is another key to happiness in the Norwegian school system. And I look back when I went to school in Princeton, and one of my vivid memories was we were taken to a garden. And I still remember the smell of the roses in that garden from third grade. It was that memorable and important to help kids get in touch with nature. Is that something you're able to do, by the way, in Peace Camp? I know you're in the midst of the city. Can you get kids involved with nature?
Well, that is very, very interesting questions indeed. And we have at our site with St. Mark's Lutheran Church, we have a few little like garden beds that we did in 2019. 2020, we've just been on Zoom, but we're hoping to reclaim those again this summer. And then getting into broader nature, well, as many of you know, like South LA is one of the most park poor areas of a park poor city. Unless you factor in the huge Griffith Park as an acre per person. But other than that, we don't have a lot of green spaces. So we get to some, it could be better. Actually, probably the biggest green space we get to is USC. So they have lots of green space there. And then I wanted to also just oh, something you said triggered something, but popped out of my head. Oh, yeah, you know, I think in the whole, well, it popped out of my head again. Go ahead. It'll come back.
All right. Well, we will take telephone 7229. Are you still there? You still will have a question?
Yes.
Oh, it's
yes.
Oh, okay. Doc Ruby, go for it.
Yes. Yes. I've just had issues this morning with the phone, and I just am so grateful for Maggie coming in with the peace flowing into, you know, for our discussion last night, and it just flowed right into the piece that you talked about and that you're going and just supporting in different ways. I mean, this is a great call. And the one thing I wanted to add that I would like to see in schools is the students taught the difference between bullying and leadership. Because I find that a lot of bullies get followers and they're into the wrong type of leadership. They don't understand what leadership really is. And this goes forward to adults too. You see adult bullies. So I just wanted to add that, and I'm glad you added spirituality to that too. So thank you very much, Susan. This is just great. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's part of the recommendations now for kids who experience bullying. They used to say, you know, tell a teacher, tell an adult, and they still say that, but the truth is, you know, and this was my reality growing up too, that, you know, they're not always there to protect you. But so we have to learn to also stand with each other, like you're saying, Ruby. You know, we have to stand alongside of kids, and, you know, bullying happens because people stand by other kids. So we have to say no to that. And I thought of my thought I was going to say to you, Anthony. One final thing is that, yeah, and it would that we did focus on kids' overall well-being as part of schools. And I do want to say, I think LAUSD has made some good strides towards that this past year as they fed families and recognized without well families, it's hard to have well kids. And I think also, though, part of what we do with our peace curriculum, it also involves these social emotional skills, which we have to teach to kids to help them manage all of the result of living in these challenging, tumultuous communities, times, world, families, because of the economic struggles in large measure. Other things too, the physical violence, but also the economic struggles. And because of that, you know, with their little systems so wired up on this fight or flight path, they have to learn how to disengage that and how to regulate themselves. And I wish that they were more, like you said, you know, we took better care of them so that that wasn't a thing. You know, it was an extra thing, not a necessary thing, that we had to teach them. How do you learn to bring down the fight or flight reaction in a world that's a constant, feels like a constant threat? And that should not be a thing, I think, with kids.